Hi everybody, Bloodletter Minis here, and today we're going to be talking about Kataphron Battle Servitors, how I think both of these units are going to perform in 9th. So, Kataphron Battle Servitors are a part of the Adeptus Mechanicus line of miniatures, created and distributed by Games Workshop. They are a troop unit in the army, which surprises a lot of people. You'd expect a unit like this to be heavy support, or elite, but no. Troops unit, so they have objectives secured, which is obviously very handy. They come on 60mm bases, which makes them quite big. This applies to both. You can run them in units of minimum 3 up to 12. So you can potentially get some very big blobs going on, or some very long screen lines, which of course you're going to have to do with 2 ranks now because of the new coherency rules, but yeah. So there's a lot of screening potential here, for at least as far as the breaches are concerned. And that size of the units is something to bear in mind when you're running the Destroyers, because they aren't very capable in close combat and get tagged very easy because it's a large unit. So yeah, let's get into their stat line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the stat line for Kataphron Destroyers, and then basically tell you what makes the Breachers different in terms of their stat line, okay? So we're starting off, we've got a 6-inch movement characteristic. Not really much surprise there. It is an infantry unit by keyword. So yeah, it's basically standard. The weapon skill is a 4+, which, is, for an army like this, isn't great, but at the same time, it's not terrible, It's not like a normal Servitor or something like that. And the amount of shots and whatnot they can put out normally makes up for this. They've got a ballistic skill of a 4+ also. Same applies to what I said before. But yeah, the weapon skill, you don't want Kataphron Destroyers to be in melee combat. That is like an absolute last resort. Strength 5, toughness 5, 3 wounds, 2 attacks, a leadership characteristic of 7, and a 4-up armor save. Now what separates the Breachers here is they get an extra attack for close combat, and they also have a 3-up armor save instead, so they're a little more durable. Now these guys are toughness 5, which I love, generally. Bolt rifles wounding you on 5s is great, but that said, the 4-up armor save for Kataphron Destroyers hurts quite a lot. Those bolt rifles I mentioned, that are winning on 5s, if they get through, and you don't have Shroud's Arm on, you're going to be making a 6-up armor save for these Kataphron Destroyers, which is, for such an expensive unit, is not really the way to go. Let's go over there. Now, I'm just going to go over the rules that they share on their profile and the Vigilance detachment. Okay? So, first rule is quite common in the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex Bionics. So basically, all models in this unit have a 6-up invulnerable save. Can be handy in some rare situations, and at the end of the day, it's better than nothing, right? A lot of people would have liked it to be a 5-up invulnerable save, but you can get that from the Vigilance detachment, and we will move on to that in just a moment. The next rule both of these units share is the called Heavy Battle Servitor. Models in this unit do not suffer the penalty for firing a heavy weapon after moving, but can only advance D3 inches. So obviously this hurts your mobility slightly with these guys, but if you want a unit to charge onto the enemy side of the board, this isn't the one. I'm just going to be clear and straight up with that, okay? There are units that do that much better. So yeah, that doesn't hurt too much. Generally speaking, you're not going to be advancing these guys. You're paying the premium on points for that solid firepower that all variants have. So yeah, their main weapons are all basically heavy, so it's a great rule to have, in my opinion. And it's basically the same as the Onaga Doomcrawler's rule. So it's cool to see on them, really. So, Kataphron Destroyers. Their cheapest configuration is the Heavy Grav Cannon, and Phosphor Blaster is their secondary weapon. Costs 45 points. So I'm just going to take you over the datasheets and the stat lines for these weapons, and then I'm going to switch it to the more expensive and commonly seen variation and just go over the weapon stats there. So the weapon for the Kataphron Destroyer in their cheapest configuration, the primary weapon is the Heavy Grav Cannon. So it's got a 30-inch range, it's heavy 5, so nice 5 shots there each, pretty solid. Strength 5, AP -3 and 1 damage. Okay, and basically the ability for grav weapons is if the target has a save characteristic of a 3+ or better, this weapon has a damage characteristic of D3. So, you know, it could be very useful in taking out your Primaris Marines and whatnot, multi-wound targets with a 3-up armor save, which are very common. And yeah, for me, the strength 5 on these hurts, personally, because, you know, when you take Kataphron Destroyers, really, I normally have tanks and stuff in mind. But yeah, this is an option you do actually see used sometimes. Something to bear in mind. Phosphor Blaster. So, 24-inch range, rapid fire 1, strength 5, -1, 1 damage, and if you didn't already know, the rules for phosphor weapons are the units that are attacked by the weapon do not gain any bonus for their saving throws for being in cover. Okay? So it's a nice little, it ignores cover and it basically kind of tags them. That's awesome, really. So yeah, that's their cheaper loadout. Now, I'm going to spend an extra 3 points to swap the heavy grav cannon for a plasma culverin. Okay? And spend 1 extra point to swap out my Phosphor Blaster for a Cognis Flamer. So, with that in mind, Plasma Culverin. It has, so the standard profile, it has a 36-inch range. It's heavy D6, strength 7, -3, 1 damage. Now, if you supercharge it, it's pretty much exactly the same, except it's strength 8 now. It gets an extra damage, so it's 2 damage, but on a hit roll of 1, the bearer is slain after all his weapon shots have been resolved. Now, one thing to mention about, because I did say this was going to relate to 9th edition, these guys get basically in 9th edition, with the leaks for the Indomitus datasheets, the Assault Intercessor Sergeant has a plasma pistol, and in the abilities, or at least in the rules section for plasma, it says unmodified. Okay, which is really, really bad news for Kataphron Destroyers in particular, because basically, as the rules stand at the moment, hopefully this gets changed. Instead of taking a mortal wound from plasma, they're just slain. You're paying nearly 50 points a model here. So basically, if you roll a 1 while shooting, yeah, then you've just lost 50 points. This is, of course, if you choose to overcharge, but generally speaking, you would, because that's how you get strength 8, that's how you make it an anti-tank weapon. So yeah, that hurts quite a bit. I'll get into how to get the +1s to hit and whatnot later on when I talk about the Vigilance detachment, which is what really makes these units. Okay, so yeah, that's a big change. I think it's hurt Kataphron Destroyers quite a lot. And now the Cognis Flamer, 8-inch range, Assault D6, Strength is 4, no AP, 1 damage, and basically it's just a flamer, so it automatically hits the target. But in addition, when firing Overwatch with this weapon, roll 2 dice when determining how many attacks it makes and discard the lowest result. Okay, so generally it's pretty decent actually. It's just what this kind of unit really needed. But of course, to charge a lot of units deep striking in will be 9 inches away, so it'll be out of range. But you can synergize this with the Tech Priest Mana Plus, increase the range of it a bit. So yeah, Kataphron Destroyers. I recommend running them in Riser. Well, this is a potential option. I would honestly put them in Lucius. So for those of you who aren't aware of the Vigilance detachment and what it does, basically from the Vigilance Defiant book, there is a detachment, specialist detachment called Servitor Maniple. You spend a command point on it. Tech Priest Domini, Engine Seers, Breachers, normal Servitors, and Destroyers get the Servitor Maniple keyword. It gives them access to a whole bunch of stratagems, okay? So, the first of these stratagems being Enhanced Bionics. So, for 1 command point, basically, you turn their 6-up invulnerable save to a 5-up invulnerable save. You spend it before the battle begins, and they get this for the rest of the battle, okay? The duration of the battle, for exact wording there, of it. And now if I take a look, the second stratagem is Noospheric Mind Lock. So for one command point, use the stratagem at the start of your shooting phase. Pick a unit of Servitor Maniple Kataphron Breachers or Servitor Maniple Kataphron Destroyers within 6 inches of a friendly Servitor Maniple Tech Priest Dominos. Add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks made by that unit until the end of the phase. So yeah, it's pretty potent. Obviously it was really good in 8th when if you managed to get +1 to hit, then Plasma wouldn't explode, but now it's unmodified, that isn't really as big a player. But yeah, so that's really what, that detachment is really what makes these battle servitors work on the tabletop. Okay, it's really what makes them durable, because that 5-up invulnerable save you're paying for. If you run a combination of the right Forge World and stratagems from the main codex, you can get them up to a 3-up invulnerable save, which is obviously really strong. So if you run Kataphron Battle Servitors, at least the Destroyers, in a Riser detachment, you can use this stratagem with them. So the stratagem is called Plasma Specialists. For one command point, use this stratagem before a Riser unit from your army attacks in the shooting phase. Add 1 to the wound rolls made for all that unit's plasma weapons, and increase the damage inflicted by any plasma weapon by 1. For purposes of this stratagem, a plasma weapon is any weapon profile whose name includes the word plasma. So of course this was really strong. If you managed to get Noospheric Mind Lock off with them, or you had Daedalosus, which is the Blackstone Fortress escalation character, he has an interesting rule set. If you use his +1 to hit aura, you could basically have them hitting on freeze, potentially re-rolling ones depending on how you do it. If you use the Servitor Maniple Noospheric Mind Lock, there will be re-rolling ones because you need a Tech Priest Dominus within 6 inches of them to do that, as I said. So freeze re-rolling ones, they will be strength 8, but so if it matches the toughness, so let's say you're firing at a knight, you'll be wounding on freeze because of a +1 to wound from that stratagem. And then of course, instead of it being a flat 2 damage after the -3 AP, it will be a flat 3 damage, which is very, very potent. And it's really what that kind of combination is what makes the Kataphron Destroyers work, really. And considering you can run these guys up to squads of 12, and you've got D6 shots each, it was very strong. Of course, the fact that they do no longer have that kind of, you know, considering plasma is now unmodified, that really hurts them, and I hope they do something to address that, like make it so you take a mortal wound if you roll a 1, instead of it just being you straight up die. Because, you know, like I said, you're spending 50 points a model here for 3 wounds, toughness 5. You don't want to be losing something like that so quickly. But yeah, that's generally the combination you see for Kataphron Destroyers on the tabletop. Now if you move on to Breachers, which are my personal favourite, and I think these guys are going to be very, very strong in the coming edition. And we're going to go over why now. So basically, Kataphron Breachers, in their cheapest configuration, come with their primary weapon is a heavy arc rifle, and their secondary weapon is an arc claw, so they have a melee weapon for a start. Okay, so the heavy arc rifle is 36-inch range, heavy 2, strength 6, -2, D3, and the ability, just like all other arc weapons, so bear that in mind when I get to the claw. When attacking a vehicle, this weapon has a damage of D6. Basically, if it's damage D3, then it will be D6, and if it's damage 1, then it will be D3. That's how the arc rule works, basically. So it's not bad at all. There's some ways to make this quite potent in the anti-tank department, but we'll get to that in a moment. It's the Mars-specific canticle. +1 strength will make it strength 7, and you're doing D6 damage. Each one's doing 2 shots, and you're doing D6 damage, so it's very, very strong. And then the Arc Claw, it's a melee weapon, +1 strength, -1, 1 damage, okay? And when attacking a vehicle, this weapon has a damage of D3. So, you know, naturally it's quite strong, because there'll be a strength 6, and -1 is also always useful in terms of melee, and they have 3 attacks each. So people have been talking a lot about things like the new Space Marine Primaris Outriders, who are going to be toughness 5 with 4 wounds each. Kataphron Breachers are a very, very good screening unit. Very good. They come with melee weapons. You can't really get rid of their melee weapons, and I don't think you'd want to. I don't know if you guys have read the core rules, but the person whose turn it isn't gets to activate first in the fight phase now, I believe, which is huge. Basically, you can just see having a Kataphron unit out, screening your more important, more valuable shooting units, and the opponent charges in, and they essentially just punch them down, and then go on about their business, go on about their day, as if nothing happened. So yeah, that's why I've got a really good feeling about these guys in the common edition. You can also give them a torsion cannon, and that replaces the heavy arc rifle, and you can also replace the arc claw with a hydraulic claw. So a hydraulic claw is basically a power fist. So it's a melee weapon, times 2 strength, except it's -1 AP. So it's times 2 strength, -1 AP, D3 damage. When attacking with this weapon, you must subtract 1 from the hit roll. Now these guys, the torsion cannon is 20 point range, heavy 1, strength 8, -4 D6 damage. So a nice little anti-tank weapon. You can have a couple of those in there if you felt your list really needed a bit more anti-tank weapon. It's nice to have the option. Personally, I don't run it. I don't really like the torsion cannon that much. It costs 9 points more at the moment than the heavy arc rifle, so I don't really like it. I don't really use it. The hydraulic claw only costs a point more than the arc claw, but having them at -1 to hit in close combat means they'll be hitting on 5s. And hitting on 5s, boy, I don't know about you, but that does not sound appealing to me. So yeah, that's the Breachers. That's what they're about anyway. Very, very strong screen. As I said, they're on 60mm bases, so if you have a unit of 9 of these, it's going to be very hard to get past them. Now we're going to talk about how to make them more durable. Now I mentioned the Servitor Maniple Stratagem, Enhanced Bionics, to give them the 5-up invulnerable save. Now they've already got a 3-up armor save, okay? So what do I recommend you do? So I mentioned you can run them in Mars for the slightly better arc rifles, or a Lucius Warlord, okay? So if you're running a Lucius Warlord, you will get access to their specific canticle, which is add 1 to the invulnerable save characteristic of all units that are affected. So their 5-up invulnerable save becomes a 4-up invulnerable save, and then you can use acquisition at any costs if they end your turn. I believe, I'll double check the wording of it, but if you end your turn and that unit is basically holding an objective, they get +1 to their attacks, and they get +1 to their saving throws. So if I'm not mistaken, you'll be at a 2-up armor save, a 3-up invulnerable save, and you'll have 4 attacks each. Now with 9 of them in the unit, that is really not something that is difficult to pull off in the slightest. If I can just find what I was looking for, acquisition at any cost. There we go, acquisition at any cost. Use this stratagem at the end of any of your turns. Select an Adeptus Mechanicus infantry. They do have the infantry keyword, which is, I know, bizarre, but hey ho. Unit from your army that was within 3 inches of an objective marker. Until the start of your next turn, you can add 1 to all saving throws made for that unit, and increase the attack characteristics of all models in that unit by 1. It's a very, very nasty combination with the Lucius thing. And to make matters worse, the Lucius Forgeworld Dogma is ignore -1 AP. And when I mean that, I don't mean take 1 from the AP. I mean as in, if it's -1, it's treated as 0. Okay? So you'll be against intercessor water rifles, against auto cannons, you name it. You'll have a 2-up armor save, and then anything where the AP gets a bit nasty, you've got your 3-up invulnerable save there. Just tag the objective with 1 guy off to the side, have a 2-rank line, and you will be able to basically screen anything. And to make it even better, you've got a Warlord trait here that synergizes with Kataphron. Yeah, Kataphrons from Engine War, right? So the Engine War Warlord trait I'm talking about is Learnings of the Genitor, okay? So at the start of your turn, it's one of the new Engine War Warlord traits where you've got 3 different abilities, and at the start of your turn you basically choose one, right? Hyper Cybernetic Physiology. Roll a d6 every time a 4-year-old Kataphron Breacher, or 4-year-old Kataphron Destroyer, or 4-year-old Kataphron Servitor unit would lose a wound whilst within 6 inches of this warlord. On a 5-up, that wound is not lost. You can see where this is going. It's so in the case of the Breachers, you've got the Lucius Canticle off, which you would just choose it, basically, and then you would pay 2 CP every turn going onwards to use it again with, I think it's Gloria Mechanicus. I will double check that for you though. I don't want to be spreading false information, guys. Cheating isn't good. Nope, it's Divine Chorus. Yeah, so Divine, you'll be used 2 CP on Divine Chorus, basically to pick the same canticle again. And then you spend 2 CP on acquisition at any cost. Which you can see when I said this is quite a command point hungry kind of combination here. But at the end of the day, you get a toughness 5. A toughness 5 free wound unit that has a 2-up armor save, ignores AP -1, has a 3-up invulnerable save, 4 attacks each with a decent melee weapon, and then to top it all off, a 5-up feel no pain. If your opponent can deal with a unit like that, you probably didn't have much chance to begin with, to be honest. That is very, very, very potent, especially when you think about the fact you can take them in up to units of 12. It's absolutely worth it, without a shadow of the doubt. These guys, I think, are going to be a star unit for the Adeptus Mechanicus in the coming editions, especially with the outflanking, especially with the new super mobile, the new super mobile units we're seeing released, and the new terrain rules that block line of sight and whatnot. These guys are going to be in a really good position, and for everything I just told you, on their cheapest configuration, they cost 30 points each. So very, very, very strong there. Now, while a lot of people would suggest you run these guys with Mars, I can't help but recommend Lucius for the reasons stated previously. And yeah, I want you guys, if you're interested in running any of the types, I want to just frankly recommend Breachers for the coming edition. They've got the tools, they've still got decent firepower, and they benefit greatly from their starting durability. Okay, now everything I said, the Lucius combinations and whatnot, it still applies to Kataphron Destroyers, by the way. So if your heart is set on Kataphron Destroyers, you can basically take what I said and put it on the Destroyers. So instead, the only difference it's going to make is your save is going to be slightly worse. As in, you're going to have a 3-up armor save, a 3-up invuln, and 3 attacks instead of the 2-up armor save, the 3-up invuln, and the 4 attacks. That really is it. I hope I've given you something helpful here, and at least if you're planning to bring in Kataphron Destroyers or Breachers and you're not certain where to take things for the new edition, I hope I've given you kind of an idea of what kind of thing you want to achieve with them. If you want to go for absolute destruction on marine equivalents, then absolutely go for Destroyers with heavy grav can. If you want to chip away at those toughness 7 units, or maybe even a bit higher, go for the plasma culverins. Okay, I really, really don't. We'll have to see how they handle the rules for overcharging, right? But I really hope they do, because if it is as it is, I would not recommend overcharging with these guys. No way would I recommend that. But Strength 7 is still not bad. Strength 7 minus 3/1 damage is not terrible, okay, especially when they're D6 shots each. And plasma culverins are blast weapons. They were listed there, as are most plasma weapons. So you've got the potential to kind of guarantee those shots against large infantry units. So there is a place for plasma in the new edition, without a doubt. And I do feel like the unmodified plasma change came as a result of the new blast rules, which makes sense, but something to bear in mind really. You don't want to risk losing such an expensive model for 1 extra damage, 1 extra strength. Maybe you can not overcharge and use it as riser, so you still get 2 damage. You're wounding toughness 7 vehicles on 3s, and toughness 8 vehicles and above slightly on 5s. It's food for thought there. But really, I honestly couldn't recommend you run Kataphron Battle Servitors in a detachment that isn't Vigilance. Not Vigilance, sorry. Isn't a Vigilance detachment that is predominantly Lucius, with a Lucius Warlord, okay? That is why, yeah, Lucius is really the way to go for these guys, as it is the way to go for a lot of things. It's a very, very strong choice of Forge World now. So I recommend you take a look into that. Of course, there are some interesting combinations for some of the new custom Forge Worlds, for example. You can get some pretty cool stuff going on with arc rifles. Also, there is a cool warlord trait which that was in Ancient Divinations of the Magos, and one of them was 6s models that score 6s to hit generate an extra hit. There's potential there for them as well, but rightly or wrongly, you'd take a 5-up feel no pain over that any day, for these guys in particular. But we've got a stratagem, Mechanicus Locum, you can give somebody who isn't your warlord a warlord trait. So why not both? That's what it comes down to at the end of the day, guys. You know, and you can use these breachers to screen your Kataphron Destroyers if you're running them both, or your Castellan robots, your Onaga Doom crawlers. Honestly, I would not worry as much about screening these units unless you've got a serious melee threat coming inbound. Because big guns never tire is obviously a thing now, and vehicles can just kind of just shoot into close combat. So that in mind, really and truly, it's just a nasty, durable blob that your opponent is going to struggle for days to shift. Okay, I think this is probably one of the most durable options Admech have right now, and the fact that they also are a troops unit and they have OBSEC is disgusting. Let's be honest. With what I've spoken about with the Breachers, you can build your list around this. Same applies to the Destroyers, of course, but you know, I think I've expressed why I'm not as keen on them so far. We'll have to see how we get on. But yeah, I hope this was beneficial, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, maybe got a combo figured out that you potentially didn't see before. And I hope you can pull off this absolutely disgusting combination of both stratagems and, you know, and what stratagems and warlord traits, and just have that invincible blob there that really makes these Kataphron battle servitors, in my opinion, a star unit in the coming edition. Peace out, and thanks for watching.